Here's 12 and 13. Love these things. 12 deals with anticipations or syncopations, and 13 deals with suspended chords. So what does it mean to be syncopated or to anticipate something? It is almost a sort of a self-explanatory, but if I was to play, let's do the bridge. I'll be at the B section. This is the bottom of page 3, the part that goes. Right, so if I play it nice and straight without any anticipations, without any syncopations, the word syncopation means to put emphasis or stress or accent where you wouldn't expect it, the original melody is not very syncopated at all. It's very sort of measured. Kind of really rigid, really on the beat, on the books, very indicative of early 19th century when that was written. If I add rhythm to that, if I add syncopation to that, if I add anticipations, jumping the gun, playing the notes before they are quote unquote originally written, I can achieve so much fun and achieve really kind of obviously a gospel-y sound, but even a jazzy sound. This is indicative of jazz and blues, these types of things. I was kind of playing with that rhythm. If I add the harmony to that, now I get this very lively sort of thing. Again, the straight, pardon me. And the way I've written it, by adding the chords, and also I'm mixing in all those points that we had talked about earlier, different bass notes and passing diminished chords and all this delicious stuff. But I'm also at this point really milking that concept of what it means to be syncopated and what it means to be anticipated. And so it's this sort of whirling dervish of different techniques together, the jambalaya, as it were. Here's the bridge, the B section, bottom of page 3. 2, 3, 4. So it's super fun. You can hear how by simply imbuing rhythm into something, it is the lifeblood, it's the excitement that it can bring. Even if you didn't change any notes or chords, just changing that rhythm is like, such a lift of energy. The 13th point I want to make is the sus chord. And in music, very, very briefly and very on a basic level, in music we talk about suspended chords. Usually, by traditional Western standards, we think about them with an expected resolution. Okay, so if you and I are out in the front yard, you got a baseball or a soccer ball or something like that, and you throw that up in the air for just a moment, that will be, here's the word, suspended. Just for a moment, for an instant, it will be suspended. It's neither going up nor it's going down. But because we live on planet Earth and there's an expectation of gravity and its actions, that ball is going to come back towards us, towards the earth. So it's the same in music. It was deliberate when this label was chosen, that if there's a suspension, it is raised up, but there is an expectation of resolution, which is to bring that back down. I'm sorry to use this word in a general sense, but in a classical world, in a traditional Western world, if we had a simple chord like this, a simple triad, a major triad, and we were to take that third and raise it up, this would be a C suspended 4. I've suspended the 4th. But usually, and I know even if you're not a musician and you're not a literate musician, just a music lover, I know you've heard this sound before. that 4 going to 3. It's extremely similar to the plagal cadence and the basis of the plagal cadence that we spoke about earlier in this lecture. There's 4 going to 3. Sometimes in a minor piece you'd have the same suspension, but the resolution wouldn't be to a major triad, it would be to a minor triad. Okay? Suffice it to say that in more modern styles, jazz, funk, certainly, let's say 20th century and beyond, the suspended chord can be used on its own without that resolution, just that existing suspended chord. And indeed, that's what I'm using here in Joyful, Joyful. So this is page 4, the last A section. I'm going to go nice and slow to talk through a few things. There's that G chord, but F in the bass. That's the previous point that I made about using a different chord tone in the bass. This is borrowed from another planet, C minor major 7, with an E flat in the bass. It doesn't even have a root in the bass. And there's my sus chord. It's really dressed up, it's really dolled up. At its heart, it's this. And you'd expect this. I don't give that away. And it has a 7th in there and a 9th and all these things, but it has that sort of suspenseful sound, right? I feel like I'm at the circus and there's a tightrope walker, so it gives you that very suspenseful sound. So those are my 12th and 13th points. The use of rhythm, especially anticipations, jumping the gun, and syncopations, adding those wonderful jazzy, funky rhythms where they wouldn't normally be expected, the kind of definition of syncopation, to put that emphasis where it's not expected. It's a surprise. And the 13th point is the use of the sus chord, or suspended chord. So I have 7 more points. Thanks for hanging in there. Here they come. Okay, so now we're getting into my wheelhouse of just my love of improvisation. There's 2 points I want to make here. They are dealing with melodic embellishment and then also soloing, but really not within the confines of a chord progression. So I'm using these 2 techniques. This is the bottom of page 4. And the first one I'm using, melodic embellishment, I suppose one could argue I've used it throughout the entire piece already. I've taken a given melody and I've simply embellished it using different techniques. So that's really a simple point to make that kind of is a blanket statement. It kind of covers this entire arrangement. I've really gone a little haywire with this melody, but melodic embellishment. I write at the bottom of the page this sort of like fireworks moment after the da, da, da. kind of this big point of punctuation, this G that holds. And this is sort of a transition, an interlude, if you will. And I think I wrote, yeah, excuse me, which is essentially just a riff, you know, like a little bluesy riff. Chromaticism and sixths. We talked about sixths. That type of thing. So just one little pebble of sand on a beach of melodic embellishment throughout this whole thing. At the very bottom of the page, you'll find a thick line, thin line, two dots, thin line, two dots, thin line, thick line, kind of with braces framing these two measures. And sometimes in music we do these things where it's just a jam. It's an open, you know, it's open. It's the proverbial Jerry Garcia closing his eyes and just you know, going crazy, going, you know, getting lost in the spirit of the music and just jamming over that. Indeed, jam bands are sort of based on that, these wide open sections. So I wanted to bring that to the party. I wanted to bring that to the table. And I limited myself in this case to be very G-centric. Now it just says G, so it could be anything. But in the spirit of what I'm trying to do in this gospel isms, I decided to try a few different things in the recording that you saw, in the video that you saw. But essentially, having fun, here's a couple of quick things that I think about when I'm having fun with just a G chord. I think about the chord itself. If it's G7, I think about this. And even those can be such a source of amazing melodic content and such great fodder for creative thinking. I'll limit myself to only using those chord tones. G, B, D, and F. So let's see. Et cetera, et cetera. I could go on for hours doing that, and that's just chord tones. Many times musicians use scales, like Mixolydian, or the blues scale, as it were, the minor pentatonic with the blue note in there. Or different chordal patterns. Those types of things. But so much fun within 2 bars, unbelievable. So I'll just button it up. There's really the 2 points that I wanted to make were melodic embellishment and G. How much fun can be had if given the license, just the incredible license. And I did take a lot of license in the video that you saw, even if there's only just one chord there. I always consider these things to be ish. You know, it's G-ish. You can sort of do almost anything that you want. For me, I think I showed in the video, I think I showed my true colors, which is rhythm and time are really fundamental to me and to my experience in music. We talked about that at the beginning. Rubato, no sense of time, it's totally fine. But when I've established a groove, I want to feel that groove. I really want to do that. And I want to feel that groove even through my improvisation, even though I'm not accompanying myself per se. I'll close with this. 1, 2, 3, 4. cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I could have way too much fun with that. But I hope that you could hear, even amidst all that malarkey that I was contributing melodically and harmonically, that the groove was at the heart of that. And that's what sustains us, I think, is that sense of time and that sense of groove. It's really the nutrition that we need to get us through those moments, more than licks, more than patterns, more than note choices, more than any of that stuff. So I've got a few more points to make. Hang on, let's have fun. All right, 16 and 17, these are exciting points, exciting points. 16 is, to me, is an unexpected thing. It came, something that as I was a kid, I never really contemplated this. So point number 16 is, what does it mean for to experience and to use the coexistence of a major third and a minor third? Isn't that crazy? My goodness. And then 17 talks about some just basic examples of improvisatory ideas, especially for those who are not that familiar with improvisation. Back to the first point that I want to make here, point number 16. My whole life, since I was a kid, I was taught that, well, you have a major chord or you have a minor chord, and that's it. These are two different things. This is vanilla and this is chocolate. End of story. This is a hamburger, this is sushi. Done. You wouldn't really have a combination of the two of them. And as I had mentioned in the previous video, I feel like over the years, as I have been exposed to different things, as I have gone to maybe a Baptist service, or I've experienced a praise band or a gospel band, or I worked with a musician that comes from the gospel background, and I hear these things and I'm like, what is that craziness? It's wonderful. It's just wonderful. So, top of page 5 is where there is another set of repeat signs, just 2 bars that go over and over again. And it's this, I'll play it for you. And I'll count it in because it's important to anticipate the first chord. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can hear how I'm jumping the gun. So there's that point about anticipation and syncopation. And it's delicious if it's soft, but intense. And that allows me this space. Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Let's take a close look at this 16th point. You and I are experiencing this here in the key of G. Do, 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 re, mi. There's that third, major third. G major. But what if I had do, re, mi? Interesting, this is G minor. So right out of the gate, that very first chord, top of page 5, the very first chord, I do this. Notice there's this as a part of the G minor, and this as a part of the G major. Now, I am oversimplifying here. After many years of trying to roll this stuff around, I'm conveniently sharing that it's the coexistence of a major third and a minor third. It's just a talking point. But what I really feel like is at work here is that the use of that B flat, the lowered third, is more of a sort of a bluesy inflection, of a longing, which could have maybe originally be this, ba-ba-doo-da, ba-doo-da, which sounds very nice, ba-doo-da. But if you strain to get to that, whoa, oh, oh, no, it gives you a much more sort of earthy, organic, bluesy sort of sound. And so I think instead of a more of a deliberate, like what a traditional composer might do, which is, oh, I'm deliberately going to use the minor third and the major third. And I mean, I'm sort of trapped on this keyboard. The topography deems that I have to make that choice of this and this. But I feel like this concept is born from something more ancient. I feel like this concept is born from something that's much more human, not attached to a piano keyboard or any instrument. It's attached to the human voice. And that lowered third really gives us this, especially when it coexists with this, it gives us that sort of like bluesy sound. And you hear that. I've heard that a lot in gospel music, that, oh. Okay, onward. The 17th point I want to make today is about improvisation. Look, if you're a jazz head or a rocker or you just love to just mess around, you should totally learn this. Oh my gosh, you'll have hours of fun. Learn this. Here's my bluesy G chord. Jazzers would call this G7 sharp 9. Don't think that much. And I'm a jazzer. Don't think like that. Man, it's not. In this context, it's not that. Context is everything. In this context, I wouldn't think of it as G7 sharp 9. Kind of a 4 chord or a 2 chord. And then a 1 chord, a G chord, what classical musicians would call a 6/4, a fifth in the bass. And have fun with, etc., etc., etc. So I wrote 3 suggestions because there are plenty of friends that just don't have this background of improvising and maybe don't have the vocabulary. But if I could show you 2 or 3 riffs, you could play this and just have fun with it. Oh my gosh. So back to the reading glasses, and I will play for you the first riff, as it were, that I wrote. You could even play just the first bit of that, which is so cool. Notice how I've anchored my pinky on G, and I'm starting at that greasy minor third. And we talked about this earlier. This is chromatic, every note. I kind of lift it with a little pickup, which is G here. Slow it down. Etc., etc. So that's one little riff, one little melodic idea, a tiny little motif that fits so beautiful in that wedge of space. It's wonderful. I'll share one more. This is I wrote this. Oh, pardon me. So this one actually is perhaps the easiest of all of them. This is the second stave. And I'm playing G, C, and D flat or C sharp, and I'm lifting the D sharp away after I initially play it. So I get this, and then I lift. And so you hear what happens. It's very exciting. It's kind of the wasabi note, kind of hits you hard, and you're like, oh, but then it... And it's kind of trying to emulate like a guitarist that's bending a note or a saxophonist that's bending a note. Let's hear how that sounds in context. Ah! et cetera, et cetera. Let me button this up here. I've got 3 more talking points to go. This lecture's gone on forever. I've had a ball. I hope it's not too long for you. More to come. All right, so we're almost done. This is the 18th and 19th points that I want to make in this lecture. These are delightful, so awesome. I especially love both of them, actually. I was going to say I especially love 18, but I love 19 as well. So here they are. In short, 18 is what does it mean to be in a stable place and then use a passing chord? We mentioned that already when we were talking about oscillating between G major and A minor. So it's the same concept, but in this particular case, this is the last bit of my arrangement, the 5th page and the 6th page. Instead of having a relatively innocuous diatonic sort of passing chord, I'm going to actually go crazy with that diminished chord. I mentioned those earlier as well. They have such a deep, how shall one say, discordant and disjunct and angst. They're these beautiful morsels, these little fire bombs of places that you don't want to stay, but they propel you into the next place, into the next stable place. I'm speaking specifically of page 5, where you have this, but it starts to instead of having a break for a solo section, it starts to actually capitalize on that same feeling, and it keeps going. Here's your passing diminished. We talked about this. Oh, here's another one. And this is simply, I'll use the word diatonic, so it's very G Mixolydian. Translation, I'm kind of bringing it back home. I'm just staying within a very limited sphere here, G Mixolydian. Let me do that one more time. We have this, passing diminished, baby, passing diminished. And if I loop that, as many musicians say, just kind of looping that same thing, I could do it all day long. And I hope you try it too. Oh my gosh, it's so fun. Oh, fell off the wagon. Play it slowly. We've done this. Here's passing diminished. A point of stability, a point of passing, diminished, a point of stability. That's easy on the piano in a tactile way. Everybody just kind of marches up. I make, at the very bottom of page 5, I make a variation of this. You realize we're playing octaves in the left hand, but I rock those octaves. I play them like this, which is so fun. So I'll add that to the mix. Oh my goodness gracious. So in that second example, it's the same ingredients. It's the exact same ingredients, but I'm rocking those octaves, and that's just hoping, I feel it, I'm feeling it. It helps to build that excitement for a wonderful finish. I even sort of crank it up even more into the 6th page, where I have sort of tread new ground as far as the chords go, but that same sort of feeling of a stable chord and a passing diminished, kind of rocking back and forth. So we have this. stable, passing, stable, passing. And here's my 19th point right here on this chord. This is a C minor major 7 chord. My point is this, and especially at this, for this particular lecture, which I'm hoping to include everyone in. I don't want to get down this bunny hole yet. I do in the pro video. It's C minor major 7. Suffice it to say, it's a chord from another planet. It's not from this G planet that we're on. I guess you could argue it's from a, no, I don't know. It's not from G planet. it's from C melodic minor. So I'm sure there's some extrapolation or some way of figuring that out. There is a C chord in G, but I've made it minor, which is the interesting thing. And again, so there you have it. I'll put these together and I'll close with these 2 points of the stable versus passing chords and using those over and over and over again to build excitement, and also the use of that lovely borrowed chord, C minor. So here we are. This is page 5, the lower half. Passing, 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 passing. Octaves. Sixth page. Pardon me, please. There's that borrowed chord. And then this brings some closure to that. You'll notice at the end there, this is the 6th page, about halfway down, it says DS Al coda. I mentioned this earlier in the lecture. It's a bit of a roadmap. It's a way to save paper and written real estate, as it were. So DS del segno, the sign. From that page 6, go all the way back to page 2. Excuse me, and you'll find that sign. That's like a little S with a line through it and 2 dots. And then that message said to us, DS, go to the sign, del segno, al coda, until the coda. So we read and read and read. After the last A section, I think that's page 4, it says to coda. So we would play to there and then jump to the coda. Again, coda is such a delightful word. It stems from the Latin for tail, or cauda, caudai. And the coda is this. Is that what I did? Yes. So I have one more point to make, and I'll freshen up on what I actually wrote for the coda, and we'll go from there, bring some closure to this lecture. So here's some closure to this lecture. My goodness, it went on a lot longer than I expected, but I have had so much fun revisiting these traits, these characteristics of gospel playing. I hope you've had a fun time too. This last point, the 20th point I want to make, is about taking liberties. And in full disclosure, when I fully give it up and take total liberties, I am really not trying to think with my head. I'm trying to think with my heart. And I'm trying to access years, 44, 45 years of playing the piano, and allow that to just come out. And so in the little video where I play the entire arrangement, not this lecture where I've sort of chopped it up, but the video that has the entire arrangement, when I go back to the sign, when I go back to that for that second time through to kind of bring some closure to the whole arrangement, I'm not even sure what I play, but I decided to have fun and take some massive liberties. And those liberties are held together, they're glued together, they are stabilized by the melody. That's the sort of DNA, that's the thread that keeps that together. And I'll demonstrate right now. I don't even know what I'm going to play, but let's see what happens. So if my life depended on it, I wouldn't be able to recreate what I just created, because my whole purpose at that juncture when I'm improvising, I don't want to look back. I only want to look forward like a comet that's sort of going through the sky. And I don't want to dwell too much on what I've actually done. Sometimes I wince a little bit because it's like, oh gosh, that didn't really work out very well. But I don't allow that to interrupt my improvisatory way of thinking. The heck with it, I just forge forward. As soon as you and I, especially if you endeavor to do the same, to improvise a little bit and to just be free, to think of this as a blank canvas, if you fully embrace that idea of a blank canvas, don't allow those thoughts to come into your head like, oh, this is right, this is wrong, this is better, this is worse. No, just be and let that happen. And that's where the magic can happen. We sort of, I don't know where this comes from. Maybe we channel these things, I don't know, but it's really wonderful. And it's a wonderful thing to practice, and you get better and better at it the more you practice it. So we have a minute. I'll confide with you. Sometimes when I want to practice this skill, I will set up an artificial sort of rubric, not an artificial rubric, a given rubric, for example, a chromatic scale. I'll start here and I'll go down. So you could hear how that sort of chromatic scale put up some goalposts for me. It gave me sort of some guidelines, almost like connecting the dots. And I would pose that as a challenge for you if that's something that you endeavor to do. Is sometimes it can be very overwhelming to be like, wow, I'm in a boat and I'm in the middle of the ocean and I can't see anything. And sometimes that's very intimidating, but by adding just one little goalpost or guidepost, that can be sort of a hand to hold, a rail to hold on to. So I'll close with this. The coda, which I botched earlier. You see at the very end of page 6, I love this use. A bit of a pause, you see these hash marks there called a caesura, a cut in the time. And then here with over it, a fermata, and then, yeah. So I hope this brings you pleasure and joy and happiness, and hopefully it brought you a bit more understanding about my arrangement of Joyful Joyful, and especially maybe a bit of insight into some isms, some traits, some things that make gospel sound as it does. I can't wait to share more music with you. Have a great day.